Hi everyone, it's Tom with the LEC preview of the 6th week of the LEC Summer Split 2022. We're now approaching what I would call the late game of the regular split, where I want to see teams being in the shape that they're going to carry out for 7 and 8. We've had the early weekends where you have to adjust to a meta, where you have to maybe adjust to new teammates or new teams based on their lineups. Figure that out. Then you have the mid game, where it's finding the team identity within the context, and now you really have to figure it out and carry it out to the later weeks. So that's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, with the now 4th seed for LEC heading into the World Championship, this means that the race for the regular split is even more tense, because at the end of the regular Summer Split, teams will get championship points, which will be combined with the Spring Split championship points, which were based on the playoff standings. So G2 got the most points, then Rogue, then Fnatic, then Misfit, Vitality, and then Excel. And based on those points, they combined, they will be seeded into the Summer Split playoffs, and the first seed will automatically qualify for World. So it's a big race still going, and it's very tense if you look at the standings overall. But before I talk about the teams in general, I do want to give a quick look at my top 10 of my LEC Super Fantasy. And you see there that Faramir is now in first place, followed by Smurfeet. I'm not sure what it's called. And Lucky Reed in third place. It's still very much possible to catch up to the top 10, probably even become first, because we have week 6, 7, 8 still to go, and then 3 more weeks for the playoffs. So in theory, we're only halfway there. And maybe you are living on a prayer. But anyway, we are going to go now over the teams in general. In the last place, we have BDS, who are now subbing in Limit to the main roster. Adota is going to go to the LFL roster, because the LFL support player, Dreamer Ace, has some personal reasons. And Limit cannot go to the LFL support place because of the 2 veteran rule. You cannot have more than 2 veterans in your ERL team. And Adam and Crownshot are already in the LFL team. So Limit can't go there. Erdota has to go there. And Limit goes to the LEC team. I don't think it's going to change much for BDS. I think that Limit brings a lot of veterancy as a player. I know that he had great splits before. Obviously, in this year, he was performing very poorly in the spring split. But I'm not sure what this dynamic is going to bring for them. They're basically back to the same roster as spring, except now they have still Agresivo in the top lane. Maybe this mix is going to do well for them unexpectedly, but I doubt it. I expect that Limit is just maybe going to pull the reins a bit more, have a bit more of a say in coordinating how they want to play out the games. But in the end, I still think this team is looking very in a very bad state, and I don't think just Limit is going to be able to fix that. SK Gaming, 4 and 7 now in the score. I think SK Gaming had a positive trend. They were being more proactive, and I'm happy to see that. I still don't think this is a team that is gonna make to the playoffs, but they'll get a few more wins here and there, maybe with some funny picks here and there. I think that's good to see. They're a bit more competitive than they were at the start. And at the start, they obviously weren't competitive. That's fun. It's a good trend. It's too late in the season, in my opinion, to make anything more of it. But maybe go the same route that I suggested to BDS a while ago. It's just, okay, which players do you want to keep going into the next season? And focus your last weeks on making the most of what's probably a doomed situation. Astralis. I think Astralis are a fun team to watch, definitely. Because they have Xerxes and Dazor, who are 2 clutch players individually. They have these moments where they can capitalize on enemy mistakes and punish them very well. And I think they do a very good job. Not necessarily together. I wouldn't call them like a solid mid jungle duo even, but individually they have the eye for seeing opportunities that could potentially get them back in the game. And I think Astralis as a whole is pretty decent, relatively speaking, for in coming together as a team in those moments and snowballing any, mini advantage that they can get over an opponent in a sticky situation. So that is something I'm Happy to see Astralis do. I've said a few times now, I hope they are that spanner in the works for the top teams and really try to catch them off guard. They have been doing that well. They are 5 and 6 now, together with Misfits and Fnatic actually. So I think they're doing well. I also don't see them making playoffs. I do think that the other teams are just a tad above them, but you know, they're still you can't underestimate them, and that's a very positive trend for Astralis at this point. Misfits, as I said, also 5 and 6 is also making a substitution. Schlatten is going to the LFL team, Misfits Premier, and they're promoting Zanzara to the main roster. Zanzara, obviously last split played for Astralis, and then got bought by Misfits for their LFL team in the off-season between spring and summer. I don't agree with this change. I think this is too late into the season. You're now in this phase. I said this is the late game. This is where you go, you pump the gas, you go all out with what you've built, and you try to make the best of it. This is going to be a reset for the team, new adjustments, new synergies you have to develop. Nothing against Azara as a person. This would be the case with any player, basically, unless you get some god tier in-game leading player who, or like a mega clutch player who can turn a tide on his own. Zanzara isn't that player, so I don't agree with this change by Misfits at all. They were making good progress, but I don't think this is it for them. So I'm a bit skeptical and a bit disappointed, honestly, in the decision, but I'll try to get more clarity when I can about why this substitution was made so late into the split. Maybe if they're gonna try to play the same game, still they will be able to get a few wins here and there. Obviously, they should get a few wins against teams like SK and BDS. I expect Misfits to still win, but I do think that this is a very odd decision for them to make. So I don't agree with that at all. Fnatic, I know that I said I was a bit more positive about Fnatic a few weeks ago, where I saw that it was after that clown week 4, I think, where we had all these upsets and all these weird results, and I said, well, we've seen the potential of Fnatic, what they can do as a team. Now I'm a bit more skeptical, not because of the potential of the team, that's obviously insanely high. We saw Rezagur and Wunder performing well together. We've seen Upset and Hylissang perform well together. We know Humanoid can be an outstanding mid laner, but it's because of the mood. I think this team is spiraling. The loss against Rogue last week seemed to really affect them because they didn't put up any fight against Excel in the match of the week the day after. And I don't see them recovering at any point. You know, this weekend they'll probably get a win against BDS, as I'll get to later. But what then? Against the top teams, they still don't function. This is not a team. We're now 1.5 split into the season, more than that even, and they haven't even reached basic team synergy. So very skeptical about Fnatic. They probably make playoffs, and then they'll be eliminated very quickly there, I reckon. So that's disappointing. I hope to be proven wrong. Maybe this potential, there's always some percentage. You can never count any team out fully because you can't predict the future. But the odds are stacked against them so heavily that I have a hard time seeing any rose-colored predictions for Fnatic against any noteworthy team in the future. So Vitality is at 6 and 5 in a shared spot with G2. I don't think Vitality is looking much better than they were a few weeks ago. Karzi and Labrov are not a good bot lane duo at the moment, even though they wanted to play together. Perks was individually obviously an incredible player last week when he went like 7-0 with Silas, I believe. He will always have that clutch factor, but Haru is just always farming and not doing seemingly much. Alfari in the top lane will always be a laner who is renowned for his laning phase. And I personally believe that he has done a pretty decent job of transitioning that into the later stages of the team. But this is also a team that, I don't know, that they're a bit better than Fnatic. You know, Fnatic is the failed super team, and Vitality, you probably wouldn't even call them a super team anymore now with Haru on there. And Labrov was always a questionable one to begin with. because with Cellmate still there, it was a super team, and you had like, yeah, sure, we'll get Laudrup in there. It's fine. He had a good summer split last year, but now you probably wouldn't call him a super team anymore. But yeah, what are they doing as a team? It's individual things sometimes come together. They're like how you say that? Like like a I don't want to say solo queue team, but like they're pre-mates, you know? It's just some pre-mates you see in your list, like, hey, you want to play together? Yeah, sure. That's how they play, where you have some understanding of what each other wants to do, but still very different ideas about the game. It's not coming together, so I'm also not very optimistic about Vitality, honestly. G2 went 2-0, which is probably very good for the mood, because before that they went 0-4, I think. And this is a streaky team. This is a team on which such results matter a lot. So breaking out of it was very good. I think they still have a lot to work on. Jankos looked kind of lost, as I discussed with Veteran on Best in the West. Actually, he seemed a bit aimless in how he wanted to play the game a few times. And he is the glue for the team, or he was the glue in the spring split, finding very good opportunities to capitalize on mistakes that the enemies were making, and then based on that, caps would follow, and they would together they would obviously transition it into a very dominant performance of the team overall. You would have Targamas and Flacket. Flacket would be like a safer laner, playing it safe, and then in team fights would be very important. Targamas would roam, help out, find good engages. Broken Blade was always this player who can have the carry potential, but it's still not there. They are not there yet, so I'm still skeptical about the shape of G2, but I will acknowledge that this is a streaky team, so maybe based on the 2-0 they had last week, they are very confident again, and we can see them going for more of these, how do you say that, more coherent plays together, because they are suddenly feeling it better. They're in the mood together to play. Excel, fine, it's a good team, probably gonna make worlds. Very exciting to watch. Patrick is an insane player. Now finally has the team to show with that he is indeed a top tier AD carry. Marcoon is obviously playing very well. Finn is solid. Nuke Duck is a fine mid laner. That's all he needs to be, and he's doing it well. Mickey X is a good support player. Pretty happy about Excel overall. They are not the best team in the LEC at the moment, I think, because they still make a few mistakes when it comes to pacing in the later game. But overall, they're solid. They're doing well. I do want to see them get to higher tiers in the next weeks, because in the first week we saw, oh, Excel looks insane. They're doing it so well, and we haven't seen that yet in the past few weeks. So I want to see them get back to that shape in the next few weeks. We'll see if they can manage to do that. Broke lost against G2 is probably just a hurdle for them. I don't think this team is going to be phased much by that loss. I think that for Rogue, they'll just continue the way they went, which is solid drafts up until the game against G2. And from there on, play the game by the book and win the game. They have insane laners. They'll play it accordingly. Odoamne, Larson, very good, very sick players. Very good bases. And mid lines, probably in my opinion the best team at the moment. The Niski Ilyoya duo is insane. Unforgiven is stable. Armut doesn't do any crazy things. No ins from him. That's all very good as well. Kaiser finds great opportunities. But as I said at the start, Ilyoya and Niski are the duo for this team. They win mid lane, transition that into an invade in jungle, into a roam, get advantages there, and from there on they don't let the game go. Obviously their mid game needs a bit more work. But I'm very confident that they are going to get there given the progress they've made in such a short amount of time. So very positive about Mad Lions. So with that said and done, let's go into the previews of the games that are going to be played. On Friday, we have SK versus Astralis as the first game. It's probably going to be the tightest game of today. Though I say that, and the last time we had a weekend of very polarizing matchup, which should have gone one way very easily. We obviously had the Clown Week, which was week 4. So maybe I'll eat my words again. But I think SK versus Astralis is going to be the closest game. Very interesting to me is actually if in the top lane Genox is going to be capable of capitalizing on Visik weak laning phase. I think that's what SK should be playing to. Also, their bot lane isn't very terrible anymore. So I think that is okay for them. But the eyes for me are more on the top side, where we have Dejor versus Certes. Certes is a bit more, I think, not necessarily clutch, but he's better in the laning phase than Dejor, in my opinion. And from like in team fights, Dejor is a bit better as what we've seen as a player. But for me, it's all in the early game. It's going to be in the mid and top lane, and also obviously how the junglers are going to be playing around them. I kind of expect Astralis to win, but Jenox to still be very good top. Because Astralis overall, if I look at junglers, I think Xerxes is a cleverer jungler than Gilius at this moment, and I think that's going to be very important. But then again, it also just might be the case that Certes pops off in the mid lane, and there's nothing Astralis can do to overcome it. So it's going to be very tight. I'll probably give it to Astralis in the end, because they're a bit more clutch than SK. But this is actually going to be a very close match, probably. And then we have Rogue versus Misfits. I think, yeah, what to say about this? Rogue plays it by the book. Misfits has made a substitution recently, has a new player to adapt to. Larson is going to be incredible in lane, probably again, and Viteo has very little to say about it in that case. So where does Misfits find their advantage? But I don't think so. Comp is an incredible laner, and maybe if they play some Hyperscaler and Neon can find a pop-off in some way, they're going to be able to do it. But Odoamne should also win the top lane pretty easily against Irrelevant, so Rogue probably wins that one. Vitality versus Excel. I'm inclined to say Excel easily wins this. They have a solid early game, which is where Vitality fails. They have a pretty good grasp on the mid and the late game, which is normally where Vitality catches up, but I don't think Excel is going to allow for any weaknesses to exist there. So I think Excel is going to win. This is going to be relatively easy to predict day. Again, I'll probably eat my words at some point, but who knows. G2 versus BDS. I mean, the one constant in the LEC at the moment is that BDS loses. Obviously, the one win BDS did get in this split is against G2, but I highly doubt that G2 will do this again. It would be fun to see from purely entertainment perspective. It would be incredibly disappointing to see from an entertainment perspective. So G2 probably win this. Mad Lions, best team in the LEC at the moment, as I discussed earlier, against Fnatic, who should have been the best team in the LEC, but are a shambles. Maybe they've done some intense team bonding, and they're going to come together as a team, and they once again try what they did against Rogue, and they play very well, with a good mood, but I still think Mad Lions is going to win this, and then it will, as soon as that starts happening, Fnatic will crumble, because that is how this team functions. They're very emotional. Once things go wrong, they fall apart. So that was day one. Pretty easy to predict in my opinion. Let's pull up day number 2. It's SK versus Misfits to start off on Saturday. Yeah, what to say about SK versus Misfits? Misfits probably as a baseline is higher, but with Sanzarva it's a big question mark. I think that they should still be have an advantage against SK Gaming. I think the bot lane of Misfits is going to be better than that of SK, and that is a pretty important factor, obviously. Mid is relatively even-ish, I would say, based on recent performances at least. But yeah, then in jungle, also pretty even. And in top lane, I would maybe Genox can play a bit better than Irrelevant. But Irrelevant is a bit more important in like the team fights, and Genox is a bit more about laning, I suppose. So overall, it's a relatively even. I would still give it to Misfits probably, because they have Veteo and Neon on their clutch players. So I'll give it to them. But it's actually also a pretty interesting game now that I think about it more. Rogue versus Astralis. Expecting Rogue to win this, even though obviously it was Astralis who did end Rogue's 9-0 win streak in the spring split. I still think Rogue is going to just play it by the book and play out Astralis pretty easily, to be honest. Mad Lions versus Excel. This is a very interesting matchup. Probably should be match of the week given the standings and given the team performances. But Vitality versus G2 is the match of the week because it's Perks versus old team. So also understandable given the viewership. But for me, Mad Lions versus Excel is the actual match of the week. Early game is going to be incredibly important here. Elyoya and Markoon, keep your eye on those because those two are going to be pivotal. Is Mad Lions going to be able to use the same strategy of pushing in mid, letting Niski roam together with Elyoya and finding advantage on the map? Or is XL able to shut that down? That is going to be key. I expect Markoon to hover mid a lot so that Niski cannot really escape. Expect Nuke Duck to get a counter pick against Niski, so he can kind of lock him up in the lane. At least that's the strategy I think they should go for. And that's going to be very interesting. In the bot lane, that might be the like the B strategy for these teams, where you can say, okay, mid is going to be locked up, so maybe Elyoya should play a bit more around Unforgiven and Kaiser, because Unforgiven is also a very good ADC, obviously. But Patrick and Mickey are also very good, so that could be like the backup shot, I think, in the lane game. But for the early game, eyes on the mid jungle duos, especially on the junglers, how are they going to be playing around, and the picks they're going to be getting. In the end, I would have to give it to Mad Lions because they've been so incredibly consistent in the past weeks and they've been playing it super well together. But there's definitely a world where I see XL win if they found the correct counter strategy to what Mad Lions is trying to do. BDS against Fnatic. I mean, I would want to say that it's obviously going to be Fnatic, but it's not that obvious, honestly, because I do expect them, as I said, to lose against Mad Lions on the day before, and that's probably going to crush their spirits a lot. And then they're up against BDS, who you should win against, and maybe they'll lose there as well. In the end, BDS is just so terrible. I think Fnatic on an individual level is just going to be able to outplay them on raw game knowledge, on raw memory of how you should play the game in its base shape. Fnatic is already quite a bit higher than BDS. So expect BDS to lose that game against Fnatic. But the interesting thing is, obviously, last time they played, it was a very close game as well. So who knows? But please, Fnatic, just win this one. You can't lose this one. Anyway, Vitality against G2. A very close game. Both teams not looking too hot, honestly. Perks versus Caps is going to be more interesting because Perks last week obviously had a pop of performance. Caps we have seen in good shape, in peak shape as well again this year. It's going to depend a lot on how the junglers are going to do. I think Janko's very good at finding advantage over mistakes that the other makes. But I think Haru, isn't necessarily going to be caught out. He's just going to be playing it safe. And I'm not sure if Jankos is going to be able to capitalize on that. I do think that Haru makes mistakes by omission, by not doing something where he should do something. The question to me is Jankos going to be able to realize this, find these opportunities, and leverage them into something more for G2? So I do overall think that it's going to be a very tight game. I actually might lean a bit more towards Vitality in this one, because I think that they have a bit more of this, I wouldn't say drive, but when for some reason I see Vitality winning this one. I can't put my finger on it because I think top lane is going to be very even between Alphari and Broken Blade. I think jungle, Jankos is going to struggle to find advantages that he can capitalize on. The bot lane is my biggest question mark because Karzi and Labrov, if they just don't int, I think Vitality has a very good shot at winning this. But at the same time, they've inted so randomly a few times. So, but is our Flacket and Targamas going to be able to do something about that? It's so tough because they haven't been the greatest bot lane. Woo! It's actually very tough. You know what? Screw it. I'm gonna say a Vitality win in this one. Back on the super team, back on the B, back on the hype train, whatever you want to call it. All things considered, just maybe that playing against his old team, playing against G2 now in this situation, Per is gonna be able to lift his team up again. So, but it's very close, like a 51-49 call. It's very tight. Very exciting game at least. So that is it for my preview. Let me know in the comments below which matchup you are looking forward to. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this content, and I'll see you next week.